DMV Download, the new daily podcast from WTOP News, is out now. Hosts Megan Clorty and Luke Garrett get the story behind the story.
Every weekday afternoon, Megan and I will go beyond the headlines with WTOP reporters and sources to bring you more on the biggest local stories impacting you, our fellow Washingtonians.
The DMV Download podcast is available now on all major podcast platforms. Subscribe today so you don't miss an episode. The DMV Download podcast is presented by Steamfitters Local 602.
Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. 30 years ago today, John Turturro's directorial debut, Mac, won the Golden Camera at the Cannes Film Festival. I spoke with Turturro in 2014 about directing himself in Fading Gigolo, as well as memories of acting in Do the Right Thing and Quiz Show. So when I was watching it, one little thing struck me the most that I think really got at the theme you're going for. When your character, the one you played, is slow dancing. You could have shot that anyway, but instead you chose to shoot it behind that row of those masks with the different faces.
Right.
And so maybe the idea is that the Gigolos we're all role players.
Yeah.
Actors.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people are always adjusting their presentation for other people. You know, when you go to work, when you talk to your boss, you do this, do that, and you put on people who are in that trade. You know, you have to think of it as you have to perform and you have to fulfill whatever that person's fantasy is. You know what I mean? Sometimes it can be pretty outrageous or whatever, or sometimes it could be something tender. So yeah.
Were you trying to go for a similar idea with the fact that that your character kept trying to come up with almost new stage names?
Well, they actually all have names. And when I talk to these guys, and they say you have to have a name, and the character has to have a name, and so, especially, you can't just be doing aliases, and that's like your brand,
right? Because
you become a brand, and so that's based on, even though it's fun in the movie, it's based on a real thing.
How many people did you talk to? Like, describe that research process.
Well, I read this book, and then there were people in the book that I liked, and I talked to the guy who wrote the book and set up a few interviews, and had lunch and talked to a few people, and they were very.
What book was it?
It's called Hoes, Rent Boys. There were all these different interviews with all different people. There's 2 versions of it, and they let me actually quote a few little things or paraphrase. It's in the credits. It's it's in the credits. Hoes, Rent Boys, this and that. They're interviews with all these pimps, prostitutes, this, that, Annie Sprinkle.
What were some of the wildest aliases?
Some crazy names, But I just was making up a whole list of names, and I had an old phone book that I was taking names out of that my father had, which I thought that would be, fortuitous in a good way. But yeah, people do some really crazy things, like dress up in clothes. They do this, do that. Sometimes people lose somebody. I mean, I didn't put that in the movie because it would have been too heavy, but. Right. People actually dress up in people's clothes that have passed away or whatever, and so you are, I was kind of choosing the most delicate description of that and letting it kind of morph into this romantic tale, that of unlikely people sort of connecting with each other.
Right.
But it's a profession that books have been written about it, movies have been made for years. So many actresses have won Academy Awards, playing either a hooker or a nun.
Midnight Cowboy.
Midnight Cowboy, which is one of my favorites.
Shows. Yeah.
And so I've always been, as a kid, I was fascinated by it. I was like, what are these people doing, But there's something about it that's, I know there's a lot of exploitation in it, but there is this direct transaction that goes on. It's like a real transaction. And there are a lot of jobs that there isn't that anymore. So there's something interesting about it.
That's true. Everything's some credit card off.
Yeah,
some
right. I mean, you're not even giving the dollar to somebody. You know
So
what I
it's
mean?
Like twisted form of human interaction.
It's twisted, right? But I mean, even people who give massages, for example, they'll tell you, people have like emotional releases sometimes because they haven't. No one's giving them any attention. Stuff like that.
When she breaks down and cries and said, "I haven't been touched."
Yeah, but that's a whole.
Obviously a whole new.
She has a whole thing. There's a whole religious connotations and her whole way she's lived her whole life.
Right.
But people do, hunger. Maybe not just. I mean, sex, yeah, but for human, contact. Human intimacy, and without that. People, you can just dry up and like disappear like a leaf blowing down the street in the wind.
Bring magic to the lonely.
So,
as you eloquently put it.
I mean, people. There are people who are good listeners, and they're not psychiatrists.
Right.
So for me, if I had to choose, I probably would choose and go in this direction. So if I needed therapy, but it is a form, and it's been around forever, and a lot longer than psychiatry.
Right.
I mean, so in a way they're kind of, and I'm sure they have, much more, explicit and rougher versions of what I'm exploring here. But I'm just using it as a metaphor, really,
For sure. The movie.
It's not my autobiography. I mean, I was only a gigolo for a little while. So,
only for a few years.
Only for a couple of years, besides.
Take me, this is the movie history nut coming out, but take me into what was it about Midnight Cowboy when you first saw it? Because, I mean, there's clear parallels. So.
Well, Midnight Cowboy, I couldn't see it. I was 12 years old, was rated X. Dustin Hoffman looked like someone who could have been a cousin of mine, so I was fascinated. I was like, what is a guy like that doing in a movie? John Voight looked really good. It was a shot of Sylvia Miles. I wanted to see it so badly. I was a kid, and I think, I wanted to see movies about adults. And I never wanted to see movies about 18-year-olds when I was 18. Right. So it was like a big thing, Midnight Cowboy, the song, everybody's talking. And it's a really good movie. I mean, I saw it again recently. And, it has like mice and men overtones, and it's a wild,
at the end, it's like a Lenny,
and when you think about, it's a wild movie. I mean, that's like not a movie that would easily be made today.
No.
Imagine
back then.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in it. So, and I mean, you would think we've progressed, and I think content-wise, we haven't at all.
We've regressed.
So. But I like that movie a lot. I like that movie Shampoo. So I thought, if I'm going to make a movie about sex, I have to have religion in it.
Stay tuned for the rest of my conversation, but first a message from a fellow WTOP podcast.
DMV Download, the new daily podcast from WTOP News, is out now. Hosts Megan Clorty and Luke Garrett get the story behind the story.
Every weekday afternoon, Megan and I will go beyond the headlines with WTOP reporters and sources to bring you more on the biggest local stories impacting you, our fellow Washingtonians.
The DMV Download podcast is available now on all major podcast platforms. Subscribe today so you don't miss an episode. The DMV Download podcast is presented by Steamfitters Local 602.
Have you learned being able to star and write and direct? I mean,
I've done it a couple times. Fifth movie, yeah. Once in a while I would say, hey, maybe try this, be a little more delicate, or go slower, or maybe this is more serious, this moment. But we just tried it different ways, and there's less people you have to talk to. There's a couple times it gets schizophrenic, but there is, at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to have I'm not going to have a fight with the director. I'm going to try it. Maybe it's too heavy. Maybe it's too light. Maybe it's a little too dour. You try to figure out what's the tone for the scene as you're living it, moment to moment. You can't apply a tone, but just what's the right approach. Right. And then you have to be in the present. But, you don't really learn from watching someone else's movies. Yeah, I mean, I never thought that initially, when I did Mac.
Spike Lee did the same thing. I mean, you worked with Do the Right Thing, 25th anniversary.
Yeah, I mean, he did it, but not to the extent Woody's done it. I mean, I just watched on the plane the other day, when I was coming back from Paris, I watched Annie Hall. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. I had a glass of Bordeaux. I told someone, so okay, but I was howling.
Incredible.
It's really, really holds up.
Absolutely.
I mean, it really holds up, and it's shot so simply at times, but I had a huge smile on my face, and I also thought the whole love story aspect of it, which becomes very surprising in the movie because you don't think that's going to be in the first half of the movie. So.
And it works totally that you even have the black and white credits.
Black and white credits at the end, but the upfront credits is 8mm. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminded me of the little Mean Streets thing.
Yeah. No, you're
me,
a film buff, I could tell.
Oh, I love it, man. It's,
Yeah, you like Midnight Cowboy, Mean Streets?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got
Joe Buck. I'm going to work you, Joe.
But you wouldn't.
Got a strong back, Joe Buck, because I'm going to work you.
And then you know what they do?
I'm
going to
work you, Joe Buck.
Yeah. Woody Allen's like your old Ratso Rizzo in this. So, you're going to die in your arms on a bus.
Maybe we should do that.
There you go. There's a promo for him on the bus.
All right, that's good, man.
I like that. But another actor turned director, one of my all-time favorite movies that I think is going to rise, Quiz Show.
Hey, thank you, man.
Underrated.
Thank you.
And I know it's got a lot of accolades too, but that might be my favorite. I mean, all your Coen Brothers stuff's great, but I love your performance in Quiz Show.
Thank you.
And it's
I had a great
exactly
guy
20 years ago.
I had a great guy to draw on. I mean, the real guy, a lot to draw on.
Any memories of that, seeing as it's a 20th
I gained a lot. I gained a lot of weight for it. I gained like 35 pounds. But I loved working with Robert Redford, and I loved working on Herb Stempel. That was a great character, and that was a big experience for me. And we had a wonderful working relationship. And I have a lot of respect for Robert Redford and affection.
It came out in such a powerful year. I feel like it gets buried all the time.
It came out with Pulp Fiction and
Shawshank, Gump, all those movies that year. Do you pull from those working with such great directors, Spike Lee, Redford, Coens? Do you?
Yeah, I
mean, in your own work,
I've worked. You can figure out, well, this guy storyboards, this guy likes to play music, this guy likes to create a nice atmosphere, this guy likes to shoot. So, the advantage you have is you can look at different things and then say, I like this, I like that, and I'm comfortable with this. I don't like to say cut sometimes, I like to do a couple takes in a row. It depends. It depends. If the scene has no music, it has no dialogue, I'll put on music. But I've worked with a lot of great people, and I think having a very organized, really prepared set, and that's not full of tension, and that people feel like they could make a suggestion here or there, and that there's a little bit the sense of play that is there is good too. And I try to do that and try to inspire people a little bit that way and create an atmosphere that I like. Because I've been on so many different sets. I've worked with Francesco Rosi when I did The Truce, which I don't know if you ever saw, which is one of the best things I think I've ever done. It's based on a Primo Levi book. I worked with Peter Weir. I had a small part in Fearless. So I've worked with some great directors, and you can learn things.
I was wondering if any of it, if it's all like subconscious, or
it's conscious, and then you take things like I have that book Notes of a Cinematographer by Robert Bresson, and I made cards out of it because I think he made some movies that some of the just amazing movies. The guy I work with, Francesco Rosi, he made so many fantastic movies, and Marty Scorsese introduced me to him, and compositionally, his movies are they're just some of the best that you'll ever see in your life.
Freeze frame and put it on your wall.
Yeah, they're just, and I worked with the guy, and I saw how he did things, but you can't repeat it, but you can become more aware of certain things.
You mentioned preparation, but also allowing the bit of play. So is the idea, have a solid, hardcore blueprint. That way,
I know what my shots are, this and that. And you can change it.
Happy accident.
That's right. Absolutely. You want to have that, but you have to be prepared because, if you only have so many days to shoot something, you've got to come in and say, this is the first shot, here's the second shot, here's this, here's that. And not only that, it's better for the actors too. And if they feel uncomfortable, you'll figure that out. Or hopefully you'll have figured it out before. But a lot of times, sometimes someone can make something better, and also you can have you could have a great idea and someone doesn't even want to try it, and sometimes then you let go of that great idea for no good reason.
Right.
If you do let go of it, sometimes it's a great idea, but then you look at it and you go, oh, that's really composed, it's beautiful, it's perfect, the acting's good, but there's not enough life in it.
Right.
I mean, there's some movies I see sometimes, I say, oh, it's all good, but there's no life in it. And I see that a lot, actually. I'm not going to say what ones, but I do see that a lot sometimes.
Right.
And then sometimes you see movies that have a lot of life in it, but don't really have a lot of content.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
it's rare when you see like something really things are just over touted, I think.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
And so when you see it, you don't forget it.
Right.
It doesn't
come around very often.
No,
So
and it doesn't matter what won this or that or whatever.
Right.
It's what stays in your brain.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.